Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Planning West for Somerset Council on the 21st of November. My name is Simon Coles. I'm chair of this committee. I'd like to thank members of the public and interested. And we have just a very brief opening statement. We're not expecting a fire drill today. It was done this morning. So if the alarm sounds, please leave the building by the fire exit doors, which are clearly marked, and we will gather outside the building at the rear of the building, right in the car park. Okay, this meeting is being recorded and will be streamed to YouTube. Therefore, any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes you any concern, please let me know now and we'll take steps to rectify that. Okay. Right, not seeing anybody suggesting that. Right, so we'll proceed. Apologies for absence, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Farberhigh, Councillor Darch and Councillor Henley.
Okay, thank you. And no substitutes, no? Okay.
No substitutes.
Thank you. And the minutes of the previous meeting, is it your wish that I sign them as a true record?
What page are we on? Page 18. It's got proposed was carried 7 in favour, 0 against and 2 abstentions. And then in the resolved, it says in favour 7, 2 against, 0 abstentions. I think that should have read 7 in favour, 2 against and 0 abstentions. In the paragraph just before it says resolved.
Right.
There was 2 against on that day.
Two against, yeah. Yeah, okay, well, with that alteration, is it your wish that I sign them as a true record of that meeting? Proposed by Andy Sully, seconded by Rosemary Woodson. All those in favour, please? Actually, no. Thank you. Okay. Right. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Will Wren, followed by Norman Cavill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Planning application 6, 2721 0009, the barn in Oak is within my ward. I've had no contact with it or about it. However, the applicant is related to a former parish council chairman of mine who I worked with very closely. And I think under the circumstances, I'd feel more comfortable not taking part in the debate and abstaining.
Agenda item 5, Mr. Chairman. This item has been about for a considerable period of time, and over the last 2 years, I've certainly talked about it on planning at Westmoreland Parish Council. So I think from that point of view, I have probably predetermined myself. So I will speak and then remove myself.
Thank you.
Application 8, for those of us extremely long in the tooth, we served on West Somerset District Council with the applicant when he was a councillor, but that was some years ago, so I don't feel that it's an interest that we should debar those of us that did from speaking and voting, but nevertheless, I think in the interest of transparency, I should note it.
Sorry, thank you. Can you hear me now? Yeah. On the same application, the land at Morehouse Farm, I did know the applicant, but I'm not sure if it's his son that runs it now, but I haven't seen for a couple of years. Also, I'm not predetermined, although I actually thought I'd put in a comment, but it hasn't appeared on the website. So perhaps I didn't. Perhaps I just looked at it. Well, I thought I had, but it hasn't appeared on the website. But I keep an open mind on it.
For that. Any other declarations? I'm not seeing anybody. Okay, thank you. Public question time?
No public question time.
No
No
public
one's
question
registered.
time. Okay. In that case, we'll move forward and we'll go on to item 5 on our agenda, which is application 48/21/0008. It's for full planning permission, and this is the erection of one detached dwelling with detached garage and associated works at the Walled Gardens at Nigella, Churchill, West Monkton. Our presenting officer is Mike Hicks. Good afternoon, Mr. Hicks, and welcome.
Afternoon, Chairman. Thank you very much. So here is the application site on the screen for you, which is outlined in red, with an existing access off the road to the east of the site. Here we are, just zoomed in a little bit, and if you can just see the cursor there, that shows you where the site is. This green hatching, that's the conservation area. So you can see from that it's just within the conservation area. These surrounding properties, so you've got Annandale, Nigella, Mulberry House, and Tresco. Those are modern properties, as in sort of post-war or just pre-World War II properties. You can see there are some heritage assets, but as in listed buildings, but they are quite some significant distance from the site. So in terms of the heritage assets that are affected, we are looking at the impact on the conservation area. Here we are zoomed in a little bit with the proposed dwelling, which is inside the walled garden. You can see the adjoining properties, Annandale and Mulberry House there, and there's a double garage to the northern side of the wall, parking and turning in front of the garage. This is the access plan from the existing access, and we'll move on to a couple of photos of this in a moment. That shows the proposed visibility displays that are achievable at the moment, and that's what is achievable with the development proposed as well. And those are the visibility displays that the Highway Authority have considered in reaching their conclusion that there are no objections raised to the proposal. So you've got a visibility display of 2 meters by 21 to the north, 2 meters by 25 to the south. These are the proposed elevations. Most of the dwelling is single story, but you can see there is a 2-story element to the eastern side. The height of the dwelling is approximately 6.3 meters at the highest point. On the 2-story section, it's a 4-bedroom property, 2 bedrooms on the ground floor, and then 2 bedrooms contained within the 2-story element. These are the elevations of the double garage. Here are the proposed floor plans, so you can see the 2 bedrooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms downstairs, and then the usual living accommodation. Here are some site sections. So the top section is looking from the south, looking north. So you've got Mulberry House on the left-hand side, and then this is Annandale on the right. And you can see the relative ridge heights there. So you've got a general stepping down from Mulberry House through the site, and then another little step down to Annandale. In terms of ridge heights, you are looking at the 2-story section of the proposed dwelling is 1.2 meters higher than the adjacent property, Annandale. And then the lower section of roof on the single-story element is 0.33 meters higher than Annandale. And then this section B here, this is a section, if you imagine it running north-south through the site. So this is the double garage and then the level step down to the site, and you can see the old wall here, the stone wall shown there. This is a photo taken from Nigella, which is the dwelling to the north. And it quite usefully just gives a bit of an overview of the site. So you've got Mulberry House here, which is a modern 2-storey dwelling. You've got Annandale here, you can just see the roof poking up there. This is the wall, so the site sits in behind that wall. This is the access here on the left-hand side, and then approximately where that timber shed is, that's where the double garage is proposed to go, which sits in front of the wall that you can see. Again, this is the same angle, but from ground level, looking across to the site. So approximately what you would see here at this point is similar to what you see with Annandale. You would be able to see the roof poking up above the wall in approximately this location, but obviously 1.2 meters taller than Annandale at the highest point. And this is down closer towards the site. You can see Mulberry House there in the background. Again, you would have the double garage in the location of the shed approximately, with the proposed dwelling behind the wall. And this is within the site looking towards Mulberry House. Looking towards the west, here we are in the site looking towards Annandale towards the east. These are some photos from the neighbouring property, Annandale. You can see, you'll see in the residential amenity section of the report, in reference to this neighbouring property, there's a little discussion about the impact on the bedroom window, and that's the bedroom window which you can see here in this location. This is the proposed access. Again, that's an existing access. I'll just go through the next couple of photos. This is looking north. The proposed access is on the left-hand side. And then this is looking south with proposed access on the right-hand side. And that access at the moment provides access to 3 existing properties. So this would increase that situation to 4. So key considerations: impact on the character and appearance of the area, impacts upon heritage assets, impacts on highway safety, impact on residential amenity, and phosphate credits. Those are all set out in the report. The recommendation is to approve. One quick note on the phosphate credits is that this application, the recommendation is subject to the signing of a Section 106 legal agreement, as this site has been accepted for the council's P credit scheme. So the Section 106 would agree the payment of the required sum to secure 0.1 P credits. And that would mean that the proposal is nutrient neutral as a result. So moving on to the recommendation, it is to approve for the reasons given in the report and subject to the conditions set out, with one minor correction to condition 9, which is the condition that withdraws permitted development rights. It makes reference to the GPDO 1995, it should be 2015, and subject to the signing of the Section 106 agreement to secure the fee credits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we move on to the speakers on this. And the first speaker on my list is Russell Paul, please. Mr. Paul, if you come to the desk in front, and when you're comfortable, if you push the right-hand button, the red light will come on, and when you start speaking, your 3 minutes begins, and we have a big fancy clock here on the end of the desk, and that will give you an idea of where you are on time. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Paul, thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak against this planning application. My name is Russell Paul, and I've lived at Annandale in West Monkton Village for 26 years. The site for the proposed new dwelling is affectionately called the Patch, as it's always been a vegetable patch, not much bigger than a tennis court. The applicant recently won on appeal outline planning permission for a new dwelling in Nigella's main gardens, and this is not within the conservation area. And the planning committee report agreed it was within the established pattern of development, being 30 metres from neighbouring property, being more than 21 metres from facing windows of neighbours, and being well over the average plot size of 1,741 square metres for the local area. I was therefore stunned, as this is a new build, a detached 4-bed, 2-storey house in the West Monkton conservation area. It is only 6 metres from my home and windows. The plot is higher than Annandale and will look down and directly into my home and gardens, plus the gardens of 7 other neighbouring properties. It is out with the established pattern of development. The plot size is only 245 square metres, and the proposal is to cause irreparable damage to the heritage wall, a designated listed asset, and the northern conservation area boundary recorded on mapping going back to 1850. There is a point of clarification I'd like to make. The Peers Practice Location Plan and existing site plan submitted 15 of October 21 highlights a red boundary line, and you saw it on the screen just there. Access up the shared driveway from Churchill to the proposed site. This is totally misleading to the committee. The applicant does not own that driveway. I own the land, and thus he has no control over this access or my land, and indeed I have flatly refused on a number of occasions all access over my land from Churchill to this planning application. I stood here 14 years ago to appeal against a planning decision to refuse me rebuilding an old 1970s extension to Annandale, same footprint, and allowing me to increase the roof height to this new extension by just 5 inches to align with the existing roof line. The planning application number was 48080066. The reason given for refusal was that it was a conservation area and minimal roof line must appear above the heritage wall. I asked for just 5 inches. I had to go to appeal, and I resubmitted my plans under 48090018. I won on appeal, undertaking to drill down into Monkton Stone by 9 feet at a cost of 30,000 to myself to meet the new planning conditions on winning the appeal and minimising the roof line above the heritage wall. What is being proposed by this application simply is poles apart from being comparable to my new rebuild of the existing structure, which should certainly be subjected to the same planning, scrutiny and restrictions and the same yardstick. The proposed new dwelling will be
3 minutes, sir.
I've been here for 26 years and I deserve another minute, please.
Appreciate that. Everybody is faced with the same 3 minutes, sir.
It's blatant infilling, sorry.
The next public speaker is Peter Grubb, please. Mr. Grubb, again, sir, if you come to the microphone, when you're settled and ready. The microphone's been left on, but when you're ready, sir, your 3 minutes start when you begin speaking. So make sure you're comfortable first, please.
Thank you for granting me the opportunity to address you today on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Munson. My name is Peter Grubb. I'm a chartered town planner and an accredited expert witness serving as the agent for the application before you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the pressing issue of the UK's chronic housing shortage, a challenge that significantly impacts our nation, with Taunton being no exception. With a recognised need for over 300,000 homes annually in England, we consistently fall short of this target, resulting in a critical lack of housing supply and escalating affordability issues. The current government identifies the planning system as a central factor contributing to this shortfall. Regardless of whether we agree with this diagnosis, we stand at an opportune moment to plan proactively for the construction of a new home, recognising the importance of each and every additional dwelling in addressing this crisis. The application before you is fully policy compliant. It is situated within the settlement boundary, where there is a policy presumption in favour of new homes. The plot is generously sized with established boundaries. This enables the integration of the dwelling in a manner that is both sensitive and harmonious with the existing village. Notably, the historical context here has been carefully considered and addressed, earning the approval of the council's conservation officer, who states that development is of an appropriate scale and will result in minimal intervention into the historic wall. It is worth mentioning also that the neighbouring dwelling, Annandale, was previously constructed within the same walled garden. The access is existing and already serves 3 properties safely, proven by the absence of any accidents, no matter how slight. The Highways Authority does not object to this proposal and rightly considers the site-specific factors here to show that a safe access can be achieved. The ownership and rights of access along the driveway are not a planning issue. The dwelling's design reflects a conscientious approach to protect local amenity with low-rise features akin to a bungalow and careful consideration to the privacy of neighbouring properties. The relationship between the proposed home and adjacent buildings is wholly typical. There will be no unreasonable loss of privacy or light, and this is obvious when you look at the site section plan. The comprehensive nature of our proposal extends beyond design considerations. It incorporates phosphates mitigation, solar PV, insulation levels surpassing building regs, a heat pump, and a substantial contribution of £43,500 to the sill. I understand that objections to new homes may arise, particularly from those who already own their own home. I would stress the duty of the planning system, however, is to plan positively for new homes to be built where they are policy compliant, which is absolutely the case here. I would urge you to please grant consent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If you turn the microphone off for me, that would be lovely. Thank you. The next speaker on my list is Councillor Norman Cavill, who's Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue is the size of the building and its impact on the landscape. It sits in a small plot. It's clearly visible to the skyline when travelling down Church Hill. In recent years, you've heard substantial houses have been built. They were managed by landscape and designers that use the topography. They snuggle into the landscape. This doesn't. The parish council has made 3 responses to this application. One strongly recommending the comments are sought from different conservation officer, as it's understood that no comments entered into the website by the conservation officer reflect the conflict of interest on the part of the author, right? In other words, absenting herself from comment. So in 10.1.2, the comment of the conservation officer does not object, doesn't support either. You've read the overshadowing of Annandale and it being unacceptable for a suburban area. A little south of the village, there's MH1 and MH2. 4,500 houses planned, but likely to end up at 4,000. 1,500 plus of them have been finished already and are there. You have another application coming in within the next month or 2 for MH2, designed to the latest policies and guidance of our garden town. Surely these principles and policies are as valid up here as they are down there. Let me tell you something of the design guide checklist, creating a place. Number 1, connections. Does this scheme integrate into its surroundings, creating new ones, and also respect existing buildings, land use along the boundaries of the development? 5, the character. Does the scheme create a place with locally inspired or otherwise distinctive character? The primary generator of character and understanding will be responding to the underlying characteristic landscape character of the area. That's Haddam Policy D7. Working with the site and its context, does the scheme take advantage of existing topography, landscape features, existing buildings and site orientation? That's Haddam D7 ENV3. 6A, just to round it off, are there any views into and out of the site that need to be carefully considered? Thank you, councillors, for your time. I've cut short what I have said simply because it was 3 minutes and I thought that it was 4. So I've given you the bare bones of it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Norman, and it is indeed 3 for all speakers. The next, I'm just going to bring the solicitor to the committee in before we move to the other councillors, whilst Norman organises himself.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just in relation to comments that were made in public speaking about private rights of way. As members will know, private rights of way and civil matters are not material considerations for you in your determination. Thank you.
Okay, the first councillor to catch my eye was Will Wren. Will?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just written down here before Councillor Cabell spoke, tight site, overdevelopment of plot, which is the first thing that sort of sprang to me. I don't like tight plots like this. When I read the report, I thought, well, this is probably okay. And then I saw the image in front of us and I thought, wow, that is just a bit tight, particularly if you've got a heritage wall in front of it. It would have been quite helpful if we'd had some photographs from within the plot itself to give a sort of 360 as to just how, what the dimensions are like in reality. Because planners have allowed some houses on tight plots in the past, which have surprised me, and yet they have worked. So I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think it's too much of a problem to approve, but I do have concerns about the realism of putting such a big house in a small space. I think that's where I am at the moment. So I think if I were to object, and I'm very keen to listen to what others have to say, I think it would be on the basis of the overdevelopment of the plot in what is proposed there, rather than the principle of putting a property there in the first place. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you, Paul. Mr. Hicks, the photographs, do you have one that views back towards Annandale?
I'm sorry, I was saying that it was looking down the plot from the wall. I was trying to get a sense of, just to see how wide it was. So is there a wall on two sides?
Yeah, so the wall, it runs along the northern side and then down the western side. So this is the western side section of the wall. On the eastern side, there is a timber fence between the site and Annandale. Yeah.
Mike. Sorry, Mike. Can I ask, is the wall listed in any way, or is it just a component part of the conservation area?
So it's not listed, it's just part of the conservation area.
Any other councillors wish to speak on this? Andrew.
Yeah, just a quick one really, so I've got an understanding. I noticed there's outline planning permission in the same garden for another dwelling. Can you get sort of a relationship as to where that other dwelling is supposed to be in relation to this one? And has that been considered when making the decision?
That's been taken into account in terms of looking at the highways impact, because clearly we could potentially be looking at 2 approvals in addition to the 3 houses that exist at the moment. So that has been taken into account by the Highway Authority. So that other plot is in this section of the blue line here. So looking at this plot, about where it says tennis court, it's this rectangle here.
Sarah Wakefield, please.
This is a difficult one because I can see why it's recommended for approval, because it does tick boxes, which is what you have to do these days. It does look a bit big on the site, and I do feel a bit sorry for the people who live next door. As far as the wall guard is concerned, it's already been built on, so I don't think from a conservation point of view, I don't think it's going to be any worse. I'm just a bit shocked, as I think Will was, when I saw the size of it inside in relation to the property next door. But I definitely think it's a building site, and site for building, and I do think that the way I look at it, and it is mostly 1 story. It's a shame they haven't kept the whole thing 1 story, I suppose. But I don't really see how we can object to this when it's recommended. Despite the fact that it's rather big, and if there is a problem with the access, then they'll have to fight that separately.
Okay, thank you. Caroline Ellis, please.
Yeah, I think I'm at with this where Sarah is at with this as well. She said much of what I would have wanted to say. Would commend though the people who put forward this application for including solar panels and air source heat pumps, because quite frankly, it's depressing the number of applications that come before us with no proper climate mitigation at all. Could you just remind me, Mike, what that plot, the patch, is being used for at the minute? It's just kind of sat there. It's just like grass sat there. And what will be the level of sort of ecological gain? Because there was lots of planting around there. There'll be increased tree planting, and there's a sycamore getting safeguarded. I'm just interested in that aspect of it as well, because yeah, if you were designing it, you'd maybe make it a bit smaller and whatnot. But yeah, if you could answer the point about the ecological benefit from building this.
Yeah, so from an ecology point of view, it's just garden at the moment, sort of tended to in a typical garden way with lawn and then shrubs around the edge. And there's a couple of trees in there. There's a sycamore tree on the southern boundary. That is proposed to be retained, and there would be a tree protection condition on the approval, so that tree would be protected. There are also some conditions in terms of ecological enhancement, so securing 1 bee brick and 2 bird nest boxes as part of the proposal as well, and that's to try and secure ecological enhancements, and that's what's been requested by the county ecologist. So we've gone with their recommendations on that.
Okay, Andy Sully, then.
Thank you, Chair. I've been listening to everyone's comments, but can't see any strong reasons for us really to go against the officer's recommendation. Even if we did try and find a reason, I think they'll go to appeal and they'd win. So I'm quite happy to recommend approval on this application. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just clarify a couple of small points? So in terms of the potential impact upon the wall, I know it's not listed. Am I right in assuming that the wall at the western end between the site and Mulberry House will remain intact, and it's a portion of the northern part of the wall that's going to be removed to facilitate access? Is that right?
So there's a new access being formed. If you just see here to the south of the garage, that's actually new access. That is
pedestrian sized bit out to allow them to walk through from the garage.
That's it, exactly.
That's it.
That's it. That is the access to the site.
As far as Mulberry House is concerned, the impression I got from the photos is that Mulberry House is at a slightly higher level, and that given that the western elevation of the proposed dwelling is single story with windows at a low level, there isn't going to be any potential for anybody from this property looking into Mulberry in any meaningful sense. If anything, it's the other way around.
That's correct. Yeah.
The real problem, so far as the public speakers is concerned, of course, is when you get to Annandale at the other end, which of course is where this proposed property is, it might not be the same size exactly, but it's kind of mirroring the Pine end of their property. But so clearly there's going to be an impact on Annandale. But so far as overlooking is concerned, am I right in thinking that it's just the 2 windows in the pitch roof of the new property from which you'd be able to look into Annandale? We go back to the eastern elevation again. So yeah, to the eastern elevation, middle right, the 2 ground floor windows will be obscured by fence or hedge or whatever's there in due course, I assume. But then there's 2 small windows in the pitch roof. Can you go over those with your cursor just for a second, just so we're clear on those?
Yes, so the 2 windows in the pitch roof, they are subject to a proposed condition. So condition 16, which states that the windows on the first floor of the east elevation should be obscure glazed and non-opening unless the flat part of the window that is openable is a minimum of 1.7 meters above the floor level. Yeah. So that just ensures you can't.
You've got where I was going. So in terms of actually somebody looking from that house into Annandale, that's been dealt with, albeit of course there will be an impact of it just being there when it wasn't before. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Will, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, just to tidy up a couple of points. You talked about the wall being a component part of the conservation area and a gap is going to be cut into it. That would not require a conservation area consent if there is such a thing? No. De minimis, is it? Okay, thank you. And the second thing, as one of the public speakers spoke about a previous application under a previous local plan and how this a similar proposal failed, or his particular application failed because it's 5 inches too high. I just wanted to be certain that that we are looking at this under the current local plan, which has different parameters to the previous one, just to be so that we are being consistent here.
Yes, absolutely. So it's been assessed against the current policy and the current SPD design guide as well on its own merits. Yeah.
Okay. Right. I'm not seeing any other councillors wishing to speak. Will, you want to come back on something?
Sorry, I need some guidance here. Councillor Cavill has just passed me a note about referencing something in the local neighbourhood plan, which I wasn't aware of. If it was in the report, I hadn't seen it. I don't know whether I'm allowed to mention it since it's coming from outside. Mr. Evans, please.
Strictly no, but Councillor Cavill declared predetermination earlier. But if Mr. Hicks wants to say anything about the neighbourhood plan.
So yes, so the report does mention the neighbourhood plan, and there are some policies, some neighbourhood plan policies, which have been considered as part of the recommendation. But I need more specifics to comment further, I think.
I'm really sorry, Mr. Cavill, I'm going to have to rule you out at this point. Okay, so we've had it proposed by Andy Sully. I'm looking for a seconder, Sarah. It's seconded by Sarah Wakefield, that we approve this application. And can I see those in favour, please?
6.
Yep. And those against?
1.
6. And any abstentions? That's
3 abstentions. 1.
2.
2 abstentions.
So that application has been carried. So we move on to our second item on today's meeting, which is item 6 on our agenda, which is 27/21/0009. It's for full planning permission for the removal of a Dutch barn and conversion of an agricultural building to one single-storey dwelling at the barn located to the west of Manor Farm, Oak. And we're just changing officers. Will you bear with me a moment? Okay, I think we're ready now to proceed on agenda item 6, which is 27/21/0009. As I say, it's for the removal of a Dutch barn and conversion of an agricultural building to one single-storey dwelling at the barn located to the west of Manor Farm Oak. Our presenting officer, Denise Hodd. So good afternoon, Denise, and welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you. So here we can see an aerial of the site showing its proximity to the Oak Manor Golf Clubhouse, just to here, and then St Bartholomew Church, just to here. Members will obviously note the countryside location. The site is in an unsustainable location outside of any defined settlement boundary. The village primary school is approximately half a mile to the north of the site. There is no public footpath connecting the development site to the village until you reach Oak itself. Here we see the existing plans. However, works to the rear wall, raising the roof and a new roof have already been undertaken without the benefit of any planning consent. From the site visit, it would appear that the supporting pillars have been raised by approximately 6 courses of brick and 1 course of breeze block. As outlined in the report, future occupiers of the dwelling would be reliant on the use of the private motor car to access day-to-day activities due to the development's unsustainable location. The site layout shows the proposed amenity space and the proposed parking. Members will note that the development does not reach to the rear boundary with the church. So I think members can just make out that the field is all this, but the development plot is just this portion to the fore. In terms of policy DM2, development in the country, category 7 relates to conversions of existing buildings. Part A states the building must be of a permanent and substantial construction and of a size suitable for conversion without major rebuilding or significant alteration or extension. And here in this photo, I think members will clearly see the change in materials that show how the roof has been raised without planning consent. Therefore, the policy of DM 2.7a has not been met. Again, we can clearly see the change in materials, just to highlight to members. Whilst the barns are not considered too appropriate for conversion under policy DM27A, an assessment under B, the sequential approach, was carried out for completeness. Additional information to address the sequential approach was requested and submitted. It is accepted that under the first consideration, community use, Oak was served by a number of existing community facilities, including a village hall, and that there was no evidence for further community use in this area. In terms of the second consideration, Class B business use, it is accepted that as vacant commercial units are available in the area, including Taunton, they are accessible and suitable for such uses. So members will see the new roof here. The third consideration in the sequential approach is other employment generation uses, and it is considered that the information submitted to address the second consideration also applies to other employment generating uses. The fourth consideration is holiday and tourism use, and here the agent relies on an appeal decision for Pen Elm at Norton Fitzwarren, where the inspector considered the core strategy justification, paragraph 6.19, did not require this step to be applied. The inspector stated, paragraph 6.19 of the supporting text for policy DM2 is clear and unambiguous when read in a straightforward manner and as a whole. It states that due to evidence of holiday homes outstripping demand, tourism and holiday usage should be restricted to the conversion of existing buildings in instances of rural diversification. Consequently, this step of the sequential test does not apply to the circumstances of the appeal proposed, and that was the Pen Elm. Pen Elm appeal related to domestic stables, whereas this building is an agricultural building, which the agent claims has permitted development rights under Part 6 of the Town and Country Plan in General Permitted Order. Furthermore, the building has been referred to as an existing agricultural building in the planning statement. It would therefore appear appear that as an existing agricultural building, it is suitable for consideration under the fourth holiday and tourism point. In terms of the fifth consideration, affordable farm and forestry dwellings, the agent again relies on the Pen M appeal. However, Oak is further away from Taunton and the accommodation that is available there. No details of the farm holding that relates to the barn have been submitted. Therefore, it is not possible to confirm if the barn is required for an agricultural or forestry worker in connection with that or any other local rural business. The sixth consideration in the sequential approach is community housing. Oak has the benefit of a recent planning consent for affordable housing within the village boundary, and the size set by this element of policy DM2 requires a maximum of 2 bedrooms for such dwellings. The final consideration is, in exceptional circumstances, conversions to other residential use. The proposed development should be considered for full holiday and tourism use as per the sequential approach, prior to consideration for other residential use. However, this would only apply if the proposed development had been found to accord with Part A and found to be of a suitable size for conversion without major rebuilding or significant alterations or extensions. The proposed development's design is considered acceptable. However, if approved, it is considered a planning condition would be required to remove permitted development rights to ensure the converted barn does not become overdeveloped or the amenity area to be dominated by domestic paraphernalia. In terms of policies D10 and D12 of the Site Allocations Development Management Plan, the proposed dwelling is considered acceptable. The proposed development is capable of compliance with parking under policy A1 of the Site Allocations and Development Management Plan. However, in terms of policy A5, accessibility of the development, the proposed dwelling is found to be wanting due to the lack of safe, secure and lit public footpaths and the reliance of any future occupiers on the private motor vehicle to access day-to-day facilities. Policy CPA of the core strategy requires development to contribute to reducing the need to travel, improve accessibility to jobs, services and community facilities, and mitigate and adapt to climate change. However, the proposed development is in open countryside outside of any defined settlement boundary and therefore in an unsustainable location. So this is taken roughly standing at the access, and we're looking at the highway that would take you into Oak. This telegraph pole is likely to have to be removed or relocated, and members will note the bend. So here we're on the bend again, looking into Oak. This is the access into St Bartholomew's Church, Oak being much further up. And this is looking towards the Oak Manor Golf Clubhouse. Again, members will know no street lighting, no public footpaths. There are 3 reasons to refuse the application. 1, due to the unsustainable location with no bus service and limited facilities nearby. 2, non-compliance with DM 2.7a, conversion of existing buildings due to the unauthorised works, including the new roof, the raising of the roof and the new rear wall. And finally, non-compliance with Part B of policy DM 2.7, as it has failed to address the sequential approach, particularly consideration number 4 for holiday and tourism use. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, moving on to the public speakers, we have first on my list is Mr. Collier, please. If you come to the microphone, Mr. Collier, when you're settled and ready, you push the right-hand button, the red light will come on, and your 3 minutes start when you begin speaking. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I am Simon Collier of Collier Planning. I'm a planning consultant and I'm speaking in support of the proposals. Section 38 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 confirms that all planning applications should be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. A highly important material consideration in this case, which appears to have been overlooked in the officer report, is that since the core strategy was adopted over 10 years ago, national planning policy has changed and now actively supports the change of use of buildings in the countryside to residential uses in order to boost the supply of housing. This is why such proposals often now don't even require planning permission. While the conversion of the building to residential does require planning permission in this case, in comparison with when the core strategy was adopted, national planning policy is now far more supportive of proposals and states that one of the exceptions to the general planning policy presumption against providing new housing in the countryside is where, quote, the development would reuse redundant or disused buildings and enhance its immediate setting, unquote. Some alterations to the building have been undertaken to it in the past as works which are allowed to be undertaken to an agricultural building without needing planning permission. However, this does not change the fact that the building is of permanent and substantial construction and suitable for conversion without significant extension. It is important for members to understand that local plans which have been adopted more recently than the core strategy and been required to reflect this current national policy are therefore much more permissive of residential uses than policy DM2. For example, Mid Devon's local plan was adopted in 2020 and its policy DM9 supports the conversion of redundant rural buildings to housing without needing to assess whether other uses are appropriate or needed. If core strategy policy DM2 was being examined by a local plan inspector now, rather than over 10 years ago when it was, it's highly likely that it wouldn't be regarded as being consistent with the current national policy objective to make good use of redundant rural buildings in order to help address the need for more housing. The requirements of policy DM2 should not therefore be afforded full weight in the determination of this planning application, and greater weight should instead be given to the fact that the proposals are fully supported by national policy, given that they involve the reuse of a redundant and disused building and would enhance its immediate setting through the removal of the large unsightly Dutch barn. Indeed, national policy would support such a proposal even in very remote countryside locations. But in this case, the building is on the edge of a village where it would be surrounded by existing development and in a relatively sustainable location close to village facilities. There has been no objections to the proposals, but instead universal support from near neighbours and the parish council. The officer report overlooks the support for the proposals provided by national policy, a highly important material consideration, and it doesn't adjust the weight that should accordingly be afforded to policy DM2. We urge you to take account of this in reaching your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of seconds over. Thank you, Mr. Collier. Okay, the next public speaker is Mr. Trevor Spurway, please. Mr. Spurway, welcome to the committee. When you're settled, sir, if you push the right-hand button, the light will come on and your 3 minutes will start when you start speaking. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Trevor Spurway, and I'm a qualified architect with over 40 years of experience here in Somerset. We first submitted this application back in April 2021, more than 2.5 years ago. The proposal before you is for the conversion of an existing single-storey barn into a single-storey dwelling, or a bungalow would be another description. In a recent report by the NHBC, the construction of bungalows has fallen to an 80 year low at less than 1,000 per annum across the whole of the UK. All at a time when the need for single-storey dwellings is at an all-time high. And as we all know, it is need that is the engine for national government planning policy, local government planning policy, and then reflected by decisions by yourselves here at Planning Committee. Contrary to the Planning Officer's report, the barn sits in a cluster of 4 existing dwellings, 2 are bungalows immediately to the south and to the west, Manor Farm itself, the parish church of Oak, and Oak Manor Golf Club. It is in the countryside, but it is not remote and is only 500 metres south of the village. Contrary to the planning officer's report, Oak enjoys a good range of facilities, including a shop, a vibrant primary school, a church, an active village hall, playing field, play areas, and the opportunity for employment at Hill Common and at the adjoining golf club. The planning officer refers to unauthorised works to the barn undertaken in 2019 and the early part of 2020, nearly 4 years ago. It is our view that they were not unauthorised, but the action of a responsible building owner, Mr. King, to maintain and protect an old building. The repair works included the restoration of external walls, the rebuilding of brick piers to the open side, as the photograph showed, and the replacement of dangerous asbestos sheeting with natural clay tiles. The benefit of these works and the conversion before you is that they have the complete support of neighbours and the support of the parish council. There have been no letters of objection. The design will see the removal of the ugly metal Dutch barn, a conversion that meets the national technical space standards, a conversion that meets local need, and a conversion that has no impact on existing trees or hedgerows, but will improve the visual amenity and countryside setting. I urge you to support the proposal for a discreet new home at Oak.
Thank you, Mr. Fleury. Spot on timing. Thank you very much. And I think you practiced it. Thank you, Mr. Fleury. The final public speaker on this is Mr. King. Mr. King, again, when you are settled, so if you push the right-hand button, the light will come on and your time starts when you begin speaking, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The unauthorised works that were taken as a repair to this ancient linny have been used by me, as a farmer for at least 50 years. The asbestos roof was in need of repair, which meant it needed replacing. So to enable the barn to be used with modern machinery, it had to be raised, which it was by less than 450 mil. In the past, the only way of cleaning this particular barn out, which was used for stock, was by hand. And me, being well into my 70s, found this very difficult. Since the necessary repair work to the linny has been done, it has become more difficult to utilise because of the very small area of land that it sits in, although it is still used for sheep. So rather than allow its demise, I felt it better to diversify the small area into a dwelling and take down the old eyesore of a rusting Dutch barn, which was a suggestion by the planners, which all the locals and the parish council have agreed and welcome. To say that the site is outside any defined settlement boundary seems strange, as there are 8 dwellings within 100 yards. On all sides, one of which has been rebuilt in the past 2 to 3 years, and 2 more within a quarter of a mile. The parish church is on the north side, just a few yards away. The application for the conversion of the ancient barn into a dwelling will only enhance the area, will not change the rural aspect of it all. I've always been a member of the Farming and Wildlife Environment Group, who is an organisation between farmers and wildlife organisations, would be in agreement with this, as it is a development in the countryside, and it only enhances the area of the countryside. The countryside will not survive unless there are people living in it. I've farmed for 60 years, and I've always looked after the land that I have farmed. In the past 10 years or so, I've personally planted thousands of yards of hedges and trees as part of the countryside stewardship scheme to enhance the area of land that I occupied and create and improve the natural environment of the land that I farmed. As a family, we have diversified, as SWAG have recommended the farming industry to do, and created and developed Oak Manor Golf Club 30 years ago, which employs at least 50 people per week. People working in the countryside and supporting and utilising the local area in a way that only improves it. Most of those people live in Norton, Wiveliscombe or Taunton. Those roads are which they get to by
Can you
a
bring your
car
remarks
each day.
to a close, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Councillor Andy Sully, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application, don't quite understand why it doesn't come under Q status, because obviously Mr. King, the applicant, said it's an agricultural building. So why has it been looked at under the Q status? I don't know if you can give us a bit of information regarding Q status, because that's obviously what people apply to convert agricultural buildings. Thank you.
Yes, it has been considered under Class Q and it was refused under Class Q because of the work that had already been taken place.
It was told by the applicant and obviously the planning person that they obviously raised the roof to make it more accessible for agricultural equipment to go in. So that's why they did it. So they didn't need planning permission then. So because in my area of Nailsbourne, there's was a big glass house and that got Q status. You wouldn't think that an old greenhouse could get Q status to build into a new dwelling, a 3,000 square foot dwelling, but they got Q status. But now there was another planning application put into, they didn't want to rectify the actual glass house and make it into a building. So they got planning permission under betterment, whereby the greenhouse will come down and they'll put a new building in the countryside. So I'm trying to explain, this doesn't seem to fall in the same light that you can reject somebody for Q status if they've made their barn better.
If the applicant had made a planning application, presumably as an agricultural notification, which is the PD rights you get under Part 6 of the General Permitted Development Order, to raise the roof, put the new barn on, the new roof on the barn as well, reinforce whatever on the rear wall, then we may, at a later stage, assuming that had been granted, been able to go down the Class Q route. But unfortunately, those works were taken without either full planning permission or a Class Q. Now, according to the planning statement that was submitted in 2.1, it's described as a redundant agricultural building currently used for seasonal lambing and the supervised care of poorly sheep throughout the year. There was no mention of having to raise the roof to accommodate agricultural machinery.
Good. I'll get in order, Andy, but thank you. Had you finished? Is that your comments?
Thank you. May come back later. Thank you.
Okay. Derek Perry, please.
I think Andy's raised an interesting point, and it may be that there's a number of issues here in the background to this. It's worth putting to bed before we move on. Now, am I right in thinking that although there's clearly a difference of opinion within the room as to whether the works were unauthorised or in some way permissible at the time, that ultimately we have to look at the application now on the merits, and even if it were the case that something unauthorised had happened in the past, that doesn't mean that we could refuse an application that we would otherwise be minded to allow. Is that sort of basic point that we could take as read? Maybe a legal point as much as anything else.
Chair, as set out in the officer report, the test that we always apply is you determine applications in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And here the officer has taken you very through in some detail the relevant policies for this application, and has also explained what is the significant material consideration in that there have been unauthorised works that you have to take into account in coming to the view as to whether this application meets the policies in the development plan or not. And the case officer is very clear in her opinion that they do not. Members can take a different view on that, or can, if members conclude that they don't meet the development plan policies, whether there are other material considerations which would justify granting permission.
I think while I'm here, in relation to settlement boundaries, I was struck by the idea that this was outside of the settlement boundary. I expect many of us will have gone to a golf club either to play golf, not in my case for Sunday lunch. So we will know the area, I suspect. I didn't have to confess, I didn't realise that the parish church was down there as well, but obviously I know that now. Isn't the reality here that the settlement boundary of Oak is, for practical purposes, is a bit sort of blurred at the edges because the church is down there and because there clearly is so much development around, what frankly is a complex around the golf club. Is that a fair point?
Well, policy SP1 states out what villages have settlement boundaries, and this one is outside of the settlement boundary. So we can't really sort of say it's fluid because the church is there. There is a boundary line, and this is outside of it. As I said, it's approximately half a mile to the church, to the school.
Right.
Okay, next speaker on my list is Andy Hadley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around this. My questions were pretty much the same. If, and I'm just trying to get, if this was originally built at the same way as it is presently, the way I'm getting it is that it would probably stood more chance of getting a Class Q and it would have been approved anyway. So that leads me on to the fact that, okay, it has been altered, and I know they're saying that was unauthorised alterations, but I was always led to believe it was an agricultural building. If you need to make alterations to it, you didn't need planning permission, but now I'm hearing that you do, or you need authorisation to be able to do that. So could I get some just clarification on what you need in order to alter an agricultural building for an agricultural purpose?
Yes, it's similar to the same as if you have a dwelling. There are permitted development order, and there's part 6 of that relates to agricultural and forestry buildings, and that sort of divides into over 5 hectares and under 5 hectares. And it says that, you know, if you need to do repairs, maintenance, possibly even erect a new building, you can do, as long as you meet the criteria. So we probably should have had an application for these works as an agricultural notification.
Moving on, Carol Ellis, please, then Sarah, and then Rosemary.
I'm feeling rather favourably disposed to this application because I mean, knowing the area, you've got there now a building that they've kind of helped sort of remain as a sort of barn. I'm fairly sure it would make a lovely redevelopment. Getting rid of that minging thing behind it, yes, which is absolutely minging. So obviously there's understandable why people who live around there would find this an improvement on the area. You get a lovely building where you have 2 redundant ones and one absolute minger. And the thing about the sustainability thing is people, I mean, I do walk down country lanes, but you could cycle to the village if that was an issue. You get living there, you could tootle round to Oak Manor and get your lunch. It's a bungalow, so I'm assuming it's not, probably less likely to be a family. It's more likely to be old people, I don't know. You could cycle up to the village, old people cycle as well. So you can cycle. So I don't understand the thing about it would necessarily, yes, okay, you might rely on your private car, but I'm not buying the thing about that, it's necessarily an unsustainable location. And the thing about the boundary as well, it's like, for practical purposes, it kind of feels like part of Oak. And you'll have people coming up and down in cars to Oak Manor anyway. So I'm kind of like, it just, everyone locally is in favour of it. You've got buildings all around it that people live in. It's turning an unused building into something much better, much more useful. So I'm struggling with why we wouldn't approve it. I think I am minded that we should approve it, actually.
Okay, Sarah Wakefield, please, and then Rosemary.
Yes, I think this is a difficult one because I do respect the officer's recommendation about the planning policies that apply, and I I think it's important that we respect our planning policies, because if we drive a coach and horses through them, we are in serious difficulty. However, as Caroline has just said, this is surrounded by other buildings, and I have been looking at my phone map, because this is not on the main road past the front of the golf club. This is on a side road out of Oak. So it's not a very busy road. I don't think we could say it's a busy road, because the main road goes across the front entrance to Oak Manor Golf Club. I've never been down this road, actually. I probably should have done, but I haven't. And I didn't realise the church was down there. I didn't actually know if it had a church in Oak. But, you know, to me, the only thing that's sad about it for me is that it's on rather a small site. So it's the barn with not very much land around it. It seems a bit of a shame, as there's a bit more land just behind it. But on the basis that, as one of the planning consultant explained, you know, this would not be a modern thing that you'd have in a planning policy. You wouldn't have the policy in the way framed in the way it is now, and the fact that it's surrounded by other buildings. And I don't think it's going to severely increase the traffic. I think you could get to the village, as Caroline has said. I think you get to the village fairly easily along what I believe to be a quiet road. I think we should agree it, and I'd be in favour of passing it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring the solicitor in at this point before I go to Rosemary. So if you bear with me a moment, Rosemary. Just bear with me a moment. I'm going to bring the solicitor in. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to policies, as has been mentioned, I think at the outset, the development plan is the council's adopted development plan. That's what you have to apply, and those policies, you know, continue to apply through the life of the plan. As I said earlier, you may feel, and I've heard arguments, that there are other material considerations which outweigh or might outweigh those policies. What I would say, if members are minded to approve the application, then that, to my view, that would be a departure from the policies in your development plan, as it's been explained by the case officer. So there would need to be counterbalancing material considerations to justify that. It would also mean, before we could issue the permission, that we'd need to advertise that as a departure, I think for, is it 21 days or 28 days? One of the two. And if there are no new matters were then raised during that, then we could issue the permission if that's the committee's decision.
Okay, I'm going to bring Rosemary in now. So I wanted to get the technical side of that out into the conversation. Rosemary.
Yeah. Is it understood as part of this plan that the other building we can see, the Dutch farm, is actually taken down? Yeah, and that's certain. It's a shame that more land wasn't then allocated around this building, because if you're taking the Dutch barn down, surely there's more land available, and it's just being taken down. We don't know what's happening to that land. Is that right?
We need to
Doesn't
look
show
at
that.
the application that's actually in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Does it go to building regs? Am I out of order? That if we actually say, well, let's do, let's have this planning permission, would it really mean rebuilding the place? Because it doesn't look very, it's been put, the roof's been raised, but it's been done in a sort of ad hoc way. Or is that not a planning permission thing?
Yes, there would be a building regulation application either for or building notice for the conversion works, because that's what we're talking about, not a replacement dwelling, but a conversion. So yes, it would have to have building regs at some point, yes.
I'm going to bring Derek Perry in and then Andy Sully.
Just a little bit of guidance on what I think is relevant in the NPPF. Been some reference to it already, but ATC makes reference to development that would reuse redundant or disused buildings and enhance its immediate setting. Seems to be there are two parts to that, aren't there? There's the question of whether it's reusing a redundant building, and then there's the enhancement of the immediate setting. If the development that's under proposal would involve removing the Dutch barn, I suspect there would be little opposition to the idea that that would enhance the immediate setting. May then be that the real question in relation to what ATC, subject to how much weight is attached to it, is whether the building is redundant. And it seems to me there's a bit of lack of clarity as to whether this is a building which is, its use isn't as great as it once was, or whether it is actually redundant. Any clarity on that? If you look at that, I don't know.
As I said in Mr. Collier's planning statement 2.2, the building itself is single-storey rectangular building situated towards the southern end of the site. It is of a stone and brick construction, sitting under a clay tiled roof, and is enclosed on all sides with the exception of the seventh elevation, which is open fronted. The building is currently used for seasonal lambing and supervised care of poorly sheep throughout the year. I therefore have taken that as being it is in current use.
Okay, Andy Sally.
To me, it seems that the main sticking point is that Mr. King did the alterations back, you say, in 2019, obviously to improve the building, and that's why he hasn't been allowed Q status. Now, if he had applied for planning permission and it was granted for him to alter the roof, take the asbestos away, like he mentioned, so if he had applied for Q status now, we would be granting that, would we? Because if we've already had the planning permission back in 2019 to actually raise the roof, but I think they mentioned 400 mil, would that be the case?
I really don't think we can comment on that because we don't know if it would have been successful as a Class Q. If he put in for an agricultural notification, we would have needed to know about the farming enterprise, how many hectares he had, and whether or not it complied with permitted development rights under Part 6.
No, my question was that if he, as a current building, if he wanted to raise the roof, would you have given him planning permission back then to make it better? Not to do with QSIP, would you have given him permission? You say that farmers now need to apply for planning permission. So would that have not been granted to raise?
As I say, I wouldn't know without having the full picture of whether or not they actually do have permitted development rights under Part 6 of the General Permitted Development Order.
Okay, we need to avoid speculation, which is what we're doing now. We're not here for what ifs. We have a set of policies, and which are our policies, which we have to work within and to. We can't just pick bits out here and there that we think suit the argument. Carol, were you looking to come back?
This is the thing about the redundant building. I mean, I've got like outbuildings, and just because you use them doesn't mean to say that you need them. That, well, if you've got a building, it's there. You think, oh, I might as well do the lambs in there, or I might as well chuck some machinery in there.
Yeah.
But clearly, you don't need it for farming purposes, and then you know, far better used as a little nice little bungalow.
Yes.
We're still not here to do what ifs. Okay. Stephen.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very interesting debate. I just want to go to page 71 really, and the reasons for refusal. Those are the three reasons given quite clearly. Reason one, proposed development is outside the defined limit of oak within open countryside. That I think is difficult to argue with. That is the settlement limit that there is. I do think there is a case for observing that Oak is perhaps an unusual village in that whilst most of the facilities are within the northern bit, so to speak, is within the defined limit. In the southern bit, if you were a golf mad churchgoer, there would be no better place to live because you could walk within 30 seconds between them. So I do wonder if the line limited facilities nearby is actually quite relevant in this case, because it depends what you want your facilities to be. It is not one of those desperately isolated places with which I am very familiar. This is positively well overdeveloped in Exmoor terms. So there is a little bit of me that says actually, whilst it is outside the defined limit of Oak, I don't know that there is an argument that could be made that it is not in an unsustainable location. Point one.
Yes.
Point two, going on to that the works are considered to be a major rebuilding, and therefore the significant alterations and extension mean that it's contrary to policy to DM 2.7a. I think you could make a case to say that they aren't a major rebuilding or significant alteration. You could make a case to say that they are a rather well done version of keeping the building in good repair. So there is a planning case that you could possibly argue with that. 3, however, does strike me as a little more difficult for us to be able to argue with. I think whatever way you cut it, 3 does make it quite difficult for us to say, okay, we could possibly argue 1, we could possibly argue 2, but 3 does end up by being a bit of a stumbling block. Instinctively, I do feel very much with those applicants who have spoken in favour of this application, but as we've observed before, we are a plan-led system. It's very difficult for us to argue with the plan. It might be one of those cases where we have to accept the reasons for refusal and go with that, but watch with interest as and when this goes to appeal.
Are you proposing the officer's recommendation? Not at this stage. No. Okay. I just wanted to make sure before we move on. I just wanted to make sure before we move on. Andy Sullivan.
I think we'd lose at appeal because I believe that it isn't a sustainable location, and to be honest, when you look at agricultural buildings, you do have to do some sort of rebuilding with them. You just can't live in an old agricultural building. You have to put in major, installations, upgrades, and all sorts of stuff. So that DM2 policy, I think, is a bit. So I'm going to be a bit of a rebel here. I want to recommend that we go for approval on this application. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Remind you, we're not here to speculate. Okay. So you are proposing, and what are your material considerations for going against the officer's recommendations, please?
Maybe deemed open countryside, but it's a sustainable location. It's one of the key things because it's not that far. You can walk to the church, you walk to the golf course, you could walk to school. It's only, they say, 500 meters away. So it's not in a unsustainable location. It's in a sustainable location, maybe deemed as open countryside, but there's houses all around it.
Okay. So we've had Sharon.
I just wanted to add on 3, where it says the proposal as submitted relates to the conversion of existing agricultural barn to a residential dwelling and is therefore considered to be tantamount to a new dwelling. Well, the point is there's a building there already. It's not like you're starting from scratch and saying, here's an open piece of country, let's put something on it, which we have many of in the Blackdown Hills, I hasten to add, all the time. But no, I don't think that quite works for me, that it's not it's not a new dwelling, it's not a new property. I mean, it's a new dwelling, but it's a property that's already there. And I think that's slightly different. I appreciate that this is, you know, the policy, our policies and everything, but I don't think that works for me, that reasoning.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. I would point out that our planning officer's professional opinion is that it contravenes
I'll come back to
three of those. So I'll bring you in a moment, Derek. So that's where I see that now. Derek, you want to come back?
Just following on from Sarah's comment,
Yeah.
that's second paragraph, reason 3. The proposal as submitted relates to the conversion of existing agricultural building to a residential dwelling and is therefore considered to be tantamount to a new dwelling in an unsustainable location.
Yeah.
So it is, am I right in understanding that it is, if we felt it was a new dwelling in an unsustainable location, that would be the reason why it would be contrary to the policy. However, if we concluded, even if it were tantamount to a new dwelling, if we felt the location was sustainable or not unsustainable, then we would have a reason to think otherwise. So,
Yeah. Okay, you finished? Sorry, I'm not trying to.
No, that's fine.
No, it's fine. Okay. Okay. Karen, did you want to come in?
I just want to second Andy's proposal to approve it.
Okay, we now have a proposal which is seconded. And I think, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I think on the basis you consider this to be a sustainable location rather than an unsustainable location. Check what Karen Martin, please do. Please do.
Chair, as I said earlier, I mean, you see the reasons for refusal that the officer has put out in terms of whether this is policy compliant. And the officer's view is that it's not. Now, that fact doesn't stop you then going on to grant planning permission, even if it is not in accordance with the development plan. What it would mean, as I said earlier, is that we need to advertise it as a departure. But if you, as a committee, felt that there were material considerations, one of which being the location of where it is and the facilities that are there, the other things I've heard mentioned in the debate is the benefit of removing the Dutch barn, the fact it's surrounded by existing buildings, and it's bringing back let's call it an redundant or building back into gainful use, and there's no highway concerns and maybe an enhancement of its setting. Those are all material considerations which you can take into account in your decision, regardless of the fact of whether it is in breach of policy. So my recommendation, if members are minded to go down this route, is that it's delegated to officers to approve, subject to it being advertised as a departure from the policy. And as I say, that would be, I think, 21 or 28 days. And then if there were no new issues arise, then permission could be granted. But yes, if members who are minded to approve could set out those material considerations, that maybe some of the things I've just listed, that would be helpful.
Okay, well, Andy Hadley followed by Sarah Wakefield. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just for one, if we went down this route, and I'm sort of minded that way myself at the moment, but there is one little thing in there that's picking at the back of the brain, is that if we then accept we're going for a departure from policy, it sort of leaves it wide open for future. And you know, the elephant in the corner is the fact that this site has been split, so that there could be another development behind it quite quickly. I know I can't presume.
That's one of the reasons why the planning solicitor has explained that we would have to advertise this as a departure, and there is that time period for which comments may or may not be made. So, sorry.
Yes, Chair, just in terms of the risk of precedent, that is a risk when you depart from your policy. But to mitigate that, if if you make it very specific as to why this particular application, you feel that there is a justification for going against policy for these particular set of facts, then that reduces the risk of it being used as a precedent elsewhere.
Yeah, that was actually one of the points I was going to make, that we need to distinguish this as being an exception to the policy for certain quite clear reasons, which are unlikely to be repeated elsewhere in quite the same way, so that we don't harm the policy permanently. And presumably the other thing we need to say is that we delegate to officers to agree the conditions. And what about phosphates?
It would need, yeah, there would need to be a phosphate solution. Subject to, I'm speculating here, which I shouldn't really do, but it'd be a part of a 106 agreement, section 106 agreement for phosphate.
Chairman, again, as members will have heard, there are various ways of now dealing with phosphate issues, and depending on what comes forward, might require a section 106. But for example, if it was private P credits being bought, now the council is in a position to impose a condition requiring those P credits to be guaranteed or secured before before commencement of development. So there are mechanisms to do that.
That's me. Okay. I thought you was going to propose it, but I think the solicitor's asking it that there be on the record, as it were, some material considerations in favour. Really for Andy, but I think what Andy's saying is that over and above what we feel is the sustainability of the location, what makes this proposal, as opposed to, for example, something very nearby, different, is the reuse of the redundant building and the enhancement of the immediate setting, which comes from the removal of the Dutch barn, both of which are very specific to this proposal.
And also Martin did say some other things which we could add in. He did it quite eloquently, the different points that he made. But why we might be mindful to go for this application. Not trying to put words into your mouth, Martin.
He was trying to put yours like that.
The only other things I'd heard in your debate, members, was the fact the site is surrounded by existing buildings and development. There were no highway concerns, and that was it. The other items have already been mentioned. So my recommendation is for the proposer and seconder that it's delegated authority to officers to approve, subject to departure being advertised and subject to conditions to secure the removal of the Dutch barn, for one, would need to be a condition, and a phosphate solution.
Okay, so we're in a position now where we've had it proposed and seconded that this application is approved for the reasons stated, with the conditions that the Dutch barn is removed and a suitable phosphate solution is agreed. Okay, yeah. And on the basis you think that this particular location is sustainable. Okay. So that was proposed by Andy, seconded by Caro. Can I see those in favour, please?
8.
Okay, those against? It's just me, I think. Yeah.
Just against?
Yeah.
Abstention.
And any abstentions? One abstention. Okay. We're going to have a quick 7-8 minute break. Come back at 22, please. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to restart. And it's agenda item 7 on our agenda this afternoon, which is 3/01/23/005. It's full planning permission, and it's for the erection of 4 dormant dwellings and associated development at Byways 19 Church Lane, Bicknoller. And Barney Waterman is our presenting officer. Good afternoon to you, Barney. You're welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So, as mentioned, this is an application for 4 dwellings in Bicknoller. The site lies within the settlement limits of Bicknoller, which is identified in policy SC1 as a primary village, which can accommodate a 10% increase in the number of dwellings. If approved, this addition of the 4 would take the total dwellings up to that permitted by policy.
Barney, I'm sorry to do this to you. You are very faint. You're very quiet. And a number of our councillors are struggling to hear you. Can I get you to shout at the microphone, please?
Okay, we'll try again. Do you want me to repeat what I've just said? Okay, I'll start right from the beginning. Good afternoon. Okay, so this is a site location plan. The site lies within the settlement limits of Bicknoller, which is identified in policy SC1 as a primary village. Policy says that there can be a 10% increase in the number of dwellings within these primary villages. For Bicknoller, that would mean an additional 12 dwellings. If this application were to be approved, these additional 4 would take Bicknoller up to its 12. This shows a Google view of the site. The access to the site is where the little red dot is. And as you can see, there are dwellings to the north and to the south and to the west. Okay. The site plan shows plots 3 and 4, which are the 2-storey dwellings to the north and east, and the single-storey dwellings, plots 1 and 2, to the south and the west. This encloses the development and reads as a farmyard complex. These are their combined plans and put my teeth back in. Plans and elevations for plots 1 and 2. The proposed includes 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen diner sitting room, and it can be constructed in rubble stone with green oak boarding and a slate roof. Plots 3 and 4 will be constructed in the same materials, just slightly larger. This shows the visibility displays and to the site from the existing church road, which shows that the displays can be met along that stretch of road. This is the view looking into the site from the highway. Looking north within the site. I'm looking west from the footpath to the dwellings to the, well, this is going to get complicated, sorry, from the southwest and dwellings to the southwest. And then back to the access. And looking east. Along the footpath, looking back towards the access. So, as I said, the proposal lies within the settlements of Bicknoller. It's considered to comply with policies SD1, SC1, SV1 and the West Somerset Local Plan and Section 3 of the Design Guide. Whilst the site does lie within the Quantock Hills AONB, the proposal was not considered to have a significant impact upon the visual amenity, and it's therefore recommended for your approval today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Barney. I have a public speaker on, that's the agent Laura Polly, and I hope I've got your name, pronounced your name correctly. Tubby, if you'd like to come to the public speaking desk, and if you push the right-hand button when you're ready, the red light will come on, and your 3 minutes, as per the clock on the end of the table here, will commence when you begin speaking. Thank you, Laura, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. My name is Laura, and I am the planning agent for this planning application. I'm here today speaking on behalf of the applicant, Sally Ann Owen, in support of her application for 4 dwellings in the village of Bicknoller. As you'll see from Brownie's pictures, the proposed development site is an equestrian paddock within the built-up area of Bicknoller. The site is well related to residential development on 3 sides and rounds off this section of the village without extending into the open countryside. As set out in the planning officer's presentation, the development of this site accords with the principles of the West Somerset local plan and would deliver a policy compliant level of housing for the village. The planning history for the site is detailed within the officer's report and confirms that 2 recent applications to develop the site has been refused. The most recent application for 5 dwellings was refused in 2021. The application before you today is the result of 2 years' hard work engaging with specialist consultants to address previous concerns regarding ecology and drainage. The scheme has been completely redesigned by our new architect to reflect the character of the village. The proposal would result in 4 dwellings comprising of 2 bungalows and 2 two-storey dwellings arranged around the central access road. We are pleased that the amended design has met the approval of the planning officer and has not attracted comments or objections from the council's landscape officer. The proposed site layout focuses on the middle section of the site with the fringes set aside for ecology and biodiversity. The public right-of-way which adjoins the site is unimpacted by the proposed development. The applicant has responded to the comments made by the highways officer and has amended the internal road layout to ensure that there is ample space for the turning of refuse and recycling trucks and the provision of visitor parking within the development. The highways officer is now able to support our proposals. There is space available within each plot for bicycle storage, and electrical vehicle charging points have been incorporated into the design. I have already received inquiries from a local house builder who has expressed an interest in taking forward this site. This shows that there's a genuine market appeal in this development and that it will contribute to meeting the housing needs within West Somerset. The application represents a sustainable development within Bicknoller and once built will represent a discreet and attractive addition to the village. The plans before members today have been carefully considered by our architect and through the use of natural materials and high quality design represents a sympathetic addition to the village. The provision of further homes in the village will help to maintain the vitality of the settlement and the viability of existing local services. The application has satisfied the council's technical consultees and has no objections from ecology, highways or drainage, and now benefits from the planning officer's support through this amended design. I hope that members are able to support the development of these new homes and vote in favour of the planning officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a second though, but that's fine. Thank you. First councillor on my list is Will Wren, please, followed by Rosemary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a small point. In the comments on page 78, it said that additional information about highways has been sent and the verbal update will be given.
Page 78.
Yeah, page 78, yeah.
Yeah.
But actually on a page 83 under 10.13 highways, it seems to be fairly detailed. Is there anything that needs to be verbally updated?
Yes, there was a bit of an overlap with the report and highways. They managed to get in on the 11th hour. So the comments in 10.13 are the final comments from highways. I should have gone back and updated, but like I said, 11th hour in highway style.
If I may ask whether reference was made by the agent, I think, to the fringes for biodiversity and amenity. Could you put the slide back up, please? Because and those are the green areas. Can you fill in what they're going to be used for, how they're going to be used? I presume, well, one would assume that they would be attached to the properties associated with them. But if their proposal is to use them for biodiversity and amenity, I think that was the phrase used. Are there any other suggestions in train, or will it be up to the householders to manage in accordance with some sort of condition?
I would need to seek clarity on that one, if that's okay. And then I could either do it, come back to you in a moment, if that's okay.
Rosemary?
Yes. Sorry. This isn't in my division, but it's very close and it's a village I know quite well. And several things worried me when I actually read. I'm very pleased that the highways have actually commented. It's not something we see very often, but they have commented. But I would take up on them about, as far as I'm concerned, this is on a blind corner, this entrance. Yes, it shows that on the plan there, I think. It's also a lot of Bicknoller is single lane, so I would worry about traffic anyway. And there's a lot of water goes through the site, and it's a sloping site. And what we've seen in recent weeks is where you've got a sloping site, the water just cascades down them, and it's not good. It's not good for the site. So that is, you know, as I see it, we'll be seeing regular flooding on this site, although I'm not monitoring it on a daily basis, but that's, I think, what we've got. Also, the local plan looks at a 10% increase on, within 10% increase of the housing in the local plan. I think this is very marginal, whether it's within 10%, because I think at one point it was said it was only 3.5% until we've actually used up the 10% we are allowed.
The report says there are, I think I'm right saying 122 homes in Bicknoller, so the suggested 10% was rounded down to 12.
12.
And these four would take it up to a figure of 12 being built in Bicknoller. So yes, it would be the
It'd
extent.
be marginal, I would have thought.
Well, it's you know, the report suggests that 10% in Bicknoller would be an acceptable amount, and these four would take it up to the 10% for the Bicknoller.
Yeah,
recommendation.
which means we've
10%.
got no margin of error.
Oh,
No margin
no,
for
but-
anybody
but
to
at
have
some
another
point-
little
at
house
some-
built.
At some point, if there is a theoretical 10%, at some point, an application will come in to take you to that 10%. We look at each application on its merits, Rosemary. If it takes up the quantum, it takes up the quantum. We are not in a position to decide whether it should be you know, one single dwelling, just in case somebody else might want to come along and put another dwelling in at a later date. This is the application in front of us. Yes, it's policy compliant in that it goes up to the 10% that was stated in our plan as desirable.
Yeah.
At some point, an application will come in to take you to that level.
I think there was a disagreement between the parish's calculations and the county's calculations of what 10% would bring us to.
Okay, I'm not in a position to answer that directly, Rosemary, but I'm looking at the offices, and this is the suggestion in the report is there are 122 properties in Bicknoller, and 10% of that was 12.2, which was rounded down to 12. So, and these four would take it up to 12, is my understanding. So it is within the parameters suggested in our policies and our plan and our adopted plan. Brian, I don't know if you want to comment on any of that.
Just to say that the number of dwellings I got was from the justification in the local plan. So where it says about the policy, a bit further down, it says the justification. So I used that, and then I looked back through our planning history on our system back to when the plan period started, at the number of approvals that have been granted by the council, and that's how I.
Okay, well. Did we reach any conclusion on what the green areas would be used for, and whether they would be attached to properties or somehow retained in ownership?
Well, sorry, Mr. Chairman, under condition 3, it says all ecological measures and/or work shall be carried out in accordance with the details contained in section 4 of the ecological impact survey. So I'm assuming that it's all bundled up under that separate document. Well, I have every sympathy with the parish council, and you know, many of us have been involved with applications over the years in Bicknoller, and one can, of course, absolutely appreciate the community's concern. However, all of those concerns have, I think we have to agree, been addressed in the planning officer's report. And I think it's very difficult, for instance, for us to sustain any arguments about highways, bearing in mind highways comments. I think that we really have very little to do other than to say that the report does give a very clear direction for us to, in this instance, approve this application. I say that with some slight regret because, you know, of the nature of the community of Bicknoller, but we are where we are, and I think this application does fulfil the terms of the plan.
Stephen, are you proposing?
I
only asked because it did sound rather like.
You detect the note of regret in my voice. However, I think under the circumstances, we have such little alternative that I will propose that we do accept that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, is there a seconder for this application? Caroline, thank you. Okay, Rosemary, you wanted to speak.
Yes, I just wondered if there's any comment about flooding on this application.
Bryony?
The site does not lie within a flood zone, and which is outlined in the report, and it's surrounded by some green space. So, and the materials used on the surfacing are to be porous to hopefully reduce the flood risk.
Okay, any other comments on this application? Anybody else want to comment on this application? In that case, we've had the officer's recommendation both proposed and seconded. Can I see those in favour to accept this application, please? 6, 8, 9, 4. Any against? No against, and any abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay, that application is carried. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item 8 on our agenda, which is the last planning application today. Item 8, which is 3/16/23/005, and it's full planning permission. And this is for the change of use of land for a period of 3 years to allow the siting of caravans to accommodate Hinkley Point workers and with the erection of an ablutions block. And this is land at Moorhouse Farm, Moorhouse Lane, Holford. And this is for an application for an additional 100 caravans on that site. I note on page 91 at 2.1 there is this. The sentence I'm picking out is it will provide for a need firstly as additional 100 caravans as accommodation for Hinkley workers, and then potentially as a tourism legacy benefit in the longer term. Obviously, at the end of the 3-year period, if there were to be any further use envisaged for that site, it would be subject to a fresh planning application. This application is for a temporary permission for 3 years. So just to make sure that we're clear on that from the outset. Okay. Right. The speaker. Sorry. My apologies, Bryony. When you're ready.
Thank you. Okay. So the site adjacent to Morehouse Farm is within the open countryside, and it will be to the north of the existing Morehouse Farm caravan, which is a mixed use between tourist and Hinckley workers. The proposed site plan shows 100 caravans for a temporary period of 3 years. The caravans are to be arranged in approximately rows of 10 going east to west, with the access road running north to south. The Google view of the site. So as you can see, roughly in the middle, that's the existing caravan site, and the lighter green field to the north is where the proposed development is. The yellow line is the A39. So the ablutions block is to be located along the western boundary, and again is to be temporary, with a condition to be removed once the 3 years is up. Visibility displays. Again, sorry, let me restart. Highways were consulted, but did not get back in time for the report. However, they have subsequently responded with information which has been clarified by the agent, which says that the displays and the swept path tracking is enough for the 16.5 articulated lorry, as requested by the Highways Authority. The access is shown a minimum 5 metres wide, with 15 metres of consolidated surfacing. The refuse will be collected from the entrance to the site, and there are no changes proposed to the current bus service, which operates from Morehouse Farm, run by EDF. With in terms of highways, the workers who stay at this site will not be allowed to take their cars to the site. They will need to take an approved Hinkley Point bus. Likewise, they won't be then able to take them to the park and rise either, because there's a bus stop from the site. Where the little blue star is on the map, that is the current pickup and drop-off point for the Hinckley buses. They come off the road, there's a turning circle clear of the highway, and the proposal is that the proposed occupiers of the new site will also utilise this bus stop. A view of the site looking within, towards the access, and then up and down Stringston Road. So if you're looking at the photo looking left, this one goes down to the A39 and right towards Sturgesen. There has been, again, before the application was, after the application was submitted, the landscape officer has come back with an objection based on the fact that it's the visual impact from the AONB. However, on balance, it is considered that when you are stood within the Quantock Hills, if you're looking towards Morehouse Farm, you will read it in context with the other current holiday and HPC use, and within the wider context of Hinkley Point just behind. It is for a period of 3 years. There are conditions that the land should be reinstated once the permission is expired. The there are, again, on balance, the number of Hinckley workers is currently 10,000. This is likely to rise to 12,000 within the next year and through to the middle of 2025. These people will be looking to stay within the local area, and it is considered that on balance, to have them located within an existing site which is serviced by an existing service, the bus service, would be more beneficial than having them dispersed throughout the community. And therefore, in this instance, I feel strongly enough that it would override the landscape objection, and therefore the proposal is recommended for your approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bryony. I have one public speaker on this, and it's the applicant, Mr. Terrier. Mr. Eyre, if you'd come to the public speaking desk, sir, when you're sat down and comfortable, if you push the right-hand button, the red light will come on, and your 3 minutes will start when you begin speaking. Okay, so make sure you're nice and comfortable first. Okay, and you'll see the big clock directly in your line of sight, so you give you a clear idea of where you are in time. Okay, sir?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Terry Eyre, and I am here to support our application. These are for touring caravans that are owned by the workers that would be staying on site. They're not mobile or static homes. In addition, I have been able to provide splay measurements for existing access and confirm it supports two-way traffic. The current EDF bus stop would be utilised as workers are not permitted to drive to work. We find some prefer to cycle and we are willing to provide a bike shelter for them. My wife and I have over 30 years experience running campsites, both at Morehouse Farm and at West Bagborough. We have always found EDF workers to be respectful and quiet. We note that there is some concern regarding visibility of the site. Although we are outside of the AONB, we feel passionate about preserving our countryside. Given the topography of the land and our existing tree planting and hedgerows, views of the site are screened from footpaths and not clearly visible from the Quantocks. The photograph that you've been shown, submitted by Friends of the Quantock, was taken over 1.5 miles away, and I have measured that, and it seems to have been taken with a zoom lens. Gives a distorted feeling of what you can actually see by eye. We are passionate about landscaping and creating wildlife havens. No hedgerows or trees would need to be removed. And in fact, we have planted over 100 trees at Morehouse over the last 30 years. We are proudly a dark sky site at West Bagborough, wherever possible to avoid light pollution and encourage bats and other nocturnal wildlife. We would be doing the same in this instance. With respect to some of the objections, we have been in talks with Fairfield Estate for quite some time as part of their inheritance tax planning. This application was part of the negotiations concerning a possible change of my tenancy. Time being of the essence for Hinkley Point C accommodation needs, I made the decision to file this application myself rather than wait for negotiations to be finalised, which I believe would have allowed EDF to have become involved. In a recent community forum meeting, EDF in fact cited 100 pitches expected for Morehouse Farm. Thank you for your time, and I am happy to answer any further questions anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eyre. Okay, councillors. Well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the planning officer said that the landscape officer had actually objected, and I'm presuming because this may not be in the AONB, it's certainly within the setting of the AONB. I've just looked at the aerial photograph, and certainly it looks as if the amount of caravans on the site is more or less going to double. It seems to be, yes, about 100% increase. So it's not just a simple increase. So that does trouble me. The gentleman here made reference to a photograph. Did we see that from the hills? Because I think that would have been quite useful to add a little bit of context, notwithstanding it may have been taken with a zoom lens or not. But
Mr. Eyre, Mr. Eyre.
Yes, yeah.
Mr. Eyre, you've had your 3 minutes. I'm not going to allow you to come back, and it's not a running conversation, sir. Okay, I'm afraid. It's now time for the councillors to discuss it. If we have a point of clarification, I may well come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you referred to a photo taken by the Friends of the Quantock. So whether Mrs. Waterman is finding that, I hope we can pop it
And
up.
he's looking for that now.
Other than that, the only thing that's, I mean, clearly, this is a huge project. It requires huge numbers of workers, and they've got to live somewhere. They live close to, kind of. So, in a way, it's acceptable. In the preamble, though, on page 91, it does talk about potentially as a tourism legacy, which I think is speculation.
As I pointed out at the start of this application, were there to be any further potential use for that site after the temporary permission ends, it would be subject to a further full planning application. So you're quite right, that's speculation as to what might happen at some point in the future at the end of the 3-year temporary planning permission, were that to be granted.
Were that to be granted, but of course there is significant infrastructure you're going to have to put in for the wash house and things like that. So there will be something there. It shouldn't bind us, but I'm sure it'll be taken into account should a further application come forward. But that may not be for us. Is that the? Yeah, these long scale shots are notoriously difficult because trying to marry up what you can see with the human eye and what a camera will show you is never clear. Bryony, can you show us exactly where there's a pylon with some trees and there's a sort of little fringe of green immediately behind that. That's it, is it?
Apologies, me and Google are having a bit of a falling out.
Yeah, I think I've seen the pylon if it's on the edge of the A39, and if it's in line, then I think I've worked out where the field is. So I think I'm broadly content with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rosemary, followed by Stephen, please.
I think I'm about to commit political suicide, but I'm about to do it. The parish council are very concerned about this, but some of their points I can't accept. They're saying, I think, hang on, there was something about walking and there's nowhere for people to walk. There's a lot of walking around this site. Yeah, and to the point that I got the local map out, and this was 2016, which shows you they don't change footpaths, but there's a footpath that runs virtually from this site down to Holford, and that takes in the lane as well. So I have not the concern of the parish council. I'm concerned that they'll think I'm a rat, but there we are. And we also have, you know, this to be kind to the workers, to be honest. They're going to be away from home, and this would be quite a nice site, and is a nice site. There's also walking down to the coast at Kilve, so you can go down to Kilve if you're off shift and you're at a loose end. There's lots to do, and there is concern from the parish council as well, and from the residents about the use of the pubs. But if they complain, I'm sure, I'm convinced, if they complain to Hinkley Point C about their people, they will take that into account, because they will not allow things that are unacceptable to go on in the locality, because it reflects on them. So that's what I want to say. I hope in a way that you'll support this, and I'm prepared to propose that we support it, because it's only a 3-year term. And you could say, well, they won't remember in 4 years when you come up to election that you were in favour of this, but that's very cynical, I'm sure. If I call us right. I think this is quite a good site. I say there's a lot of access to it, and to say that there's no, it's a narrow country lane. I think if they're taking it off the lane, yes, but you're talking about one caravan at a time going in, as I understand it. That was the impression I got. And then they stay on site until the end of the term. I don't know if the officers can say that's how I read it. And so I think it's quite a good site. And we do have to take into account that we host a very important project that, in terms of the environment, is very important to us, and the electricity that will produce. I'm sure that's not popular either, but I'm going to say that because I've said it before, I think. When it was first mooted, back along when I was a chairman of the Willington Parish Council. I'm not on Holford. I think they're good people. But on this occasion, they're saying that the actual A39 junction at the top of Hill Lane is difficult. Well, I use it a lot. And the Stegursey Road, I use a lot. I use it every time I go to Stegursey, and people pass me all the time. But if you're talking about the lane off of it, I'm sure that that is quite narrow, but it won't be used that much. I hope that helps. And I'm prepared to propose this.
Okay, thank you, Rosemary. Okay, Stephen, you're next on my list.
Oh, sorry.
Can I congratulate Councillor Woods on the elegance with which she just fell on her sword? But I have to say, I'm very inclined to agree with her. We've got to accept the fact that we've got the biggest building site in Western Europe within, well, a short coach ride off this particular site. So whilst I note the Friends of Quantock photographs, they didn't have to really pan out very much further, and you would have seen the massive construction going on, which day and night assaults the eye. This is a practical solution to part of the accommodation problems there. It is time limited for 3 years, very clearly conditioned, and we do have conditions here in place for restitution of the site. Unless, of course, there's a further planning application, but that will be determined as and when that is made. So we're looking at a 3-year time limited approval at the moment. As Councillor Woods has rightly said, I think that the highways concerns are really not sustainable. It is a site which is really very straightforwardly accessed. And so for all of the reasons noted in the report, I'm actually happy to second Councillor Woods' proposal.
Thank you for that, Stephen. Any other councillors wish to go on? Andy?
Just want a bit of clarification, please. On parking, so obviously looking at the plan of the 100 caravans, you can see looks like one parking space next to each one. How many people will be in each caravan? Because I'm just thinking if there's 2 or 3 people, sorry? Well, depends how friendly. Of course, quite right, Councillor Bay.
Talking temporarily or permanently?
Because
right.
Well, obviously people have got to get to the site, so they've got to drive their car.
I understand the question.
I'm just trying to
We're
work
going
out.
to ask Bryony to answer it.
Yeah,
Bryony.
thank you.
There is one space allocated per caravan. These are touring caravans, so unless you're going to be very friendly or cozy, or you really like your friend, then I imagine you wouldn't get more than 2 people in them.
Thank you. So touring cameras, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
Actually, that was the point I was going to ask. I thought somebody said touring caravans. So the idea is they bring their own caravan, they park it, and they bring the car, but they're not allowed to use the car after that. They have to use the transport. Is that right? So aren't they allowed to go out in their car when they're not at work? Yeah, so there could be quite a lot more cars around then, but not for work. Obviously, they've got the
not
bus.
for work purposes,
Yeah,
because
that was the
you have to
clarification.
provide at the bottom of the lane.
Yeah.
Bus stop.
Well, that was the clarification I wanted. I must say, having visited the Hinkley Point development the other day, courtesy of the council, it is a fascinating, huge project, and there's sites all over the place with people living in them, because to accommodate this number of workers is a monumental task at any time. And I'm satisfied that after 3 years there will be a further application if it's going to remain as a campsite.
But that's speculation, Sarah. We don't know that. I mean, it would very definitely need to be a further application at that time, should the owners wish to do that. I've no idea what they're going to wish to do in 3 years' time. That's speculation. Okay. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this? I can't see any raised hands. Okay, well, it's been proposed by Rosemary Wood and seconded by Stephen Pugsley that we accept the officer's recommendation and grant full planning permission for a temporary 3-year period of this application. Can I see those in favour, please? That's unanimous. That's unanimous. Excellent. Right, that concludes our business for this afternoon because I understand there are no planning appeals to report this month. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. So in that case, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you at next month's planning. Thank you, and have a pleasant evening.